Hello, everyone, and welcome to Congressman Chris Deluzio's Telephone Town Hall. This event is a chance to share your thoughts with Congressman Deluzio. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Dirk, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's Telephone Town Hall, which is scheduled to last about an hour. Now, as you may know, Congressman Deluzio is a Navy and Iraq war veteran, worked on voting rights and cybersecurity as a lawyer, and organized a union with the steelworkers. And now he proudly represents Pennsylvania's 17th Congressional District and all of you. We'll get started in just a few minutes, but this live interactive event is all about giving you the chance to ask Congressman Deluzio questions about the issues you care about. Please press star 3 on your phone keypad to submit your question anytime during the event. Now, if you're streaming this event online, you can type your name and question right below the streaming player. Now, we can't get to all the questions, but we will get to as many as we can. After pressing star 3, you'll provide your question to a staff member. They will record your name, hometown, and your question, and put it in the queue for the congressman to answer. Again, submit your questions by pressing star 3 to speak with a staff member and leave your question for Congressman Deluzio. Now, to everyone just join us, welcome. You're here at the start of Congressman Chris Deluzio's Telephone Town Hall. We'll be getting started momentarily. Along with asking questions, you can also get subscribed to Congressman Deluzio's e-newsletter by pressing star 6 on your telephone keypad. Again, to subscribe to the Congressman's e-newsletter, please press star 6 to leave your email and get subscribed. We're glad you're joining Congressman Chris Deluzio's Telephone Town Hall. We're going to give people a few more moments to join the call with Congressman Deluzio's office. And for those just joining, if you want to ask a question, please press star 3 to submit your question. Again, that's star 3 if you have a question you want asked. Now, as we get this event started, Congressman Deluzio has a poll question to better understand who has joined us tonight. So you can use your telephone keypad to answer the following question. Are higher costs impacting you and your family this holiday season? Please press 1 if higher costs are impacting you. Press 2 if higher costs are not impacting you. So again, are higher costs impacting you and your family this holiday season? Please press 1 if yes, higher costs are impacting you. Press 2 if no, higher costs are not impacting you. A number of people are responding. Thank you very much for participating in this first poll question on this live telephone town hall with Congressman Deluzio. I'll share the results of this poll after we take some questions. So please keep submitting your questions by pressing star 3. And you can also stream this event online at deluzio.house.gov/live. There again, you can type your name and your question right below the streaming player. Well, it's not possible to get to everyone's questions. We will get to as many as possible, so please stay on the line to hear if your question is answered. And you can also listen to the audio stream of this event on Congressman Deluzio's Facebook page, or, as I just mentioned, deluzio.house.gov/live. Now, I'd like to invite Congressman Chris Deluzio to provide some opening remarks. Congressman, the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Dirk, and hello, everybody. I just got back to Washington yesterday for a full week of session before the holidays, and I should, of course, wish a happy Hanukkah to our Jewish friends and neighbors celebrating. There's a lot going on in our federal government, as always, and lots I'm looking forward to for this coming year. But tonight, I want to share some updates on how I'm working to serve and represent all of us, hear what's on your minds, and answer as many questions as we can get to. And it looks like we got a lot of folks on. Nearly 3,600 of you are on the call right now. That's great. Thanks for joining, and thanks for taking time out of your night tonight. So I'll just introduce myself quickly for folks who maybe don't know or haven't joined before. I grew up in Thornburg in Allegheny County. I'm a proud alum of Ingram Elementary, and I went to high school at Bishop Canevin, where I was a senior when 9/11 attacks happened that pushed me into service. I went to the Naval Academy and then served as an officer. The Navy, my deployments took me at sea and to Iraq on the ground. After my military service, I became a lawyer. I worked on voting and cybersecurity issues at Pitt, successfully organized a union with the steelworkers. And I will tell you, I'm a proud husband and dad to 4 little kids growing up in Western Pennsylvania. And since I was first elected to this job in 2022, it has been the absolute honor of my life to serve and represent all of us in Congress, fighting for Western Pennsylvania. And with that, let's get into some of what's happening down in Washington, where I am right now. I'm sure a lot of folks have been following the debate around the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, and what the military strikes are in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. I've got a lot of concerns, to be frank, about the legal issues here, not just that reported second strike of folks who survived initial strike in the water, but for the whole operation. Our Constitution is pretty clear. It's the American people through the Congress who get to decide whether we go to war, whether we send our military into harm's way. And no president, doesn't matter your political party here, no president gets to decide that alone. And let's remember, Congress has not declared war or authorized the use of military force here. The American people have not authorized that kind of war or military force, and that's the bigger picture here, I think. And I'm sure we'll get into it more, but I think that debate should be happening right out in the open for folks. And more specifically on that second strike, that U.S. boat strike that I'm guessing a lot of people see in the news, reports were that strike killed people who had survived an initial strike clinging onto the wreckage of a boat. And rather than guess and jump to conclusions, I've been pretty clear. We need a full investigation to find out exactly what happened, who was giving what kind of orders, what were they seeing, what was the video feed. I think the American people should see all of this. I want to hear, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, from the people who were involved in that operation. There should be briefings to us in the Armed Services Committee. The public should see much of this to get answers and to find out exactly what happened, who knew what, and if there needs to be accountability, who should be responsible. So more to say about that, I'm sure. But closer to home, I want to talk about health care and health insurance premiums that are already pretty darn high and are skyrocketing for lots of people. I've been sounding the alarm about this for a while now. And yet, because politicians in Washington have refused to take action, thousands of people in our congressional district who get their coverage on penny, right? That's our Affordable Care Act or Obamacare exchange in Pennsylvania. Those people are facing an impossible choice. Do you bust your budget paying more for premiums, or do you roll the dice? Maybe skip getting health insurance altogether, or maybe you're buying worse coverage and maybe risk bankruptcy if you get sick or have to go to the hospital. That's a terrible choice for anybody. And I'll give some pretty hard numbers here. The average penny customer, Beaver County, will see their premiums go up $137 a month, about $125 more a month if you're in Allegheny County. And if you're the typical 60-year-old couple around here earning the almost middle-of-the-road household income, that's combined income, $80,000, $85,000 a year, you're expected to see your premiums rise 274%. That's more than $19,000 for the year. That is a lot. That is hard for anybody to afford, especially on top of rising costs for groceries, energy bills, housing. I can go on and on. And the solution here, I think, is pretty obvious. At the bare minimum, the Congress should extend these tax credits that make these Affordable Care Act plans a little more affordable. We should do that for 3 years. I'm on a bill to do that. That would stop these huge premium increases and give time to work on something bigger to fix our healthcare system, which I bet most of us will agree is pretty expensive, that we could do better in. And we've got to figure this out. I think nobody, I should say, really want to see healthcare costs spike. I certainly don't. I do want to share some good news as we wrap up the year. I had 2 good legislative wins for us recently. First, my bill to rename Swickley's Post Office after beloved local historian and author Betty Cole passed the House unanimously, and I'm hoping we'll get it through the Senate here and signed into law. Also won a fight to stop the closure of more than 100 Navy Reserve centers across the country, including one right in our area, Moon Township. So winning that fight was important for readiness. It will help keep our Navy reservists trained, connected to the fleet, at the ready to keep us safe if we need to mobilize them for active duty service, especially Navy reservists right here in Western Pennsylvania. We also had a pretty big and good year for bringing home federal funding. More than $900 million in grants and contracts came to Western Pennsylvania. That's stuff from supporting our fire departments to building infrastructure and so much else. My team, my office, we closed more than 3,200 constituent cases. That's helping people with problems they're having with federal agencies, and as a result, got more than $10 million returned to constituents through things like getting delayed tax refunds paid out, earned benefits, and so much else. So we've got some good things done this year, but much more important work to do in the Congress next year for sure. I will keep folks posted what's going on. Big priorities on lowering cost, smashing corruption, and the big one I talk about a lot, restoring the American dream. We got a lot more to get into tonight. I'll stop, and I think we'll get to some questions.
Thank you very much, Congressman. We will get to the first question in just a moment for this end-of-the-year telephone town hall. Now, before we get into it, just a quick reminder, you can submit your questions by pressing *3 on your telephone keypad. And along with asking questions, tonight you can get subscribed to the Congressman's weekly email newsletter by pressing *6. We're glad you've joined us for Congressman Chris Deluzio's telephone town hall. And let's go ahead and get into it. Our first question here, Congressman. Nate in Marshall Township asks, is the VA really going to eliminate thousands of healthcare jobs, or is the media just scaring us?
Thanks, Nate. Look, I sure as heck hope the VA is not really going to go through this plan to cut. The reports are thousands of healthcare jobs. And by the way, if anyone on the call is being impacted by this, you work at the VA in Oakland, Hines, Monroeville, Beaver County Clinic, anywhere else, call my office. Let us know what you're hearing, what you're going through, if you're experiencing anything at all around healthcare jobs at the VA. The reporting, if not everyone's up to the same speed here, the reporting that's come out in the last couple of days that the VA has a plan to cut up to 35,000 healthcare positions. That's like doctors, nurses, people who are providing healthcare. I think that's reckless. And the VA Secretary, Doug Collins, has repeatedly said and made promises that he's not going to cut VA healthcare or fire VA workers that provide healthcare. Well, we're going to find out if he's been telling the truth or not. And again, this is just coming out in the last couple of days. My team is digging in to find out exactly what's going on and what the plans are from the VA and the Trump administration. So much more to learn. I will keep everyone posted of what I can learn. But I want to be clear. The care and benefits that my fellow veterans receive are earned by many veterans at great personal cost and risk. I often talk about our government's, our collective obligation to provide that care and benefits. That's a sacred obligation. I'm a VA patient. I use the VA. I think I got some skin in the game here, and I'm going to fight as hard as I can if this is really the plan of the Trump administration VA. But what I already see and have seen this past year is the administration has been executing what I think is a privatization plan of gutting VA services and care to push more healthcare out into the for-profit space, out where we pay more for care with not the same kind of care coordination, worse outcomes in many places. And I'll give you some examples of that. The VA, under the Trump administration, put a hiring freeze in place and then used that same hiring freeze, now it seems, as justification to fire folks. It's part of the VA's plan, and they're talking about outsourcing more of this care. I think in doing that hiring freeze of eliminating probationary employees earlier this year, the VA was signaling to healthcare workers that your job was going to get tougher and worse, and that fewer folks maybe were applying or didn't want to come work, and then the VA used that as evidence to eliminate those positions. Morale is down by many counts in healthcare workers at the VA, making it a tougher place to work. And again, I think this is also, they can sell off and privatize VA healthcare that will be really profitable, I'm sure, for a lot of for-profit insurance and healthcare businesses and corporations. But I know what the studies say, that the VA provides better or as good as healthcare as what is out in the community at a better value. And remember, there are places all over the country, especially if you're further away from Pittsburgh, more rural parts of Pennsylvania, where There is not some surplus of doctors and private insurance or private care out there. That county clinic may be your best and closest bet to get health care if you're a veteran. I think we should be investing in growing more VA health care. And remember, this is also happening against the backdrop of the bill the president signed over the summer, the big beautiful bill or the big ugly bill, depending on your point of view, that puts at risk hospitals closing. The reports and the studies have suggested 5 hospitals in western Pennsylvania alone might be closing. So if the VA thinks they're going to privatize care, which will cost the public a lot of money, I think give worse care to veterans, that's happening against the backdrop of closures of hospitals because of cuts. And so I just think especially rural veterans are really going to be at risk here. Let's defend the VA. Let's fund the VA. Let's demand the best for veterans health care. That means investing in the VA, demanding better care, privatizing it, getting rid of thousands of people. That's not. I don't think that's the right way to do this. I think that's betraying that sacred obligation our country has. And I come back to this basic point. This is about paying for the cost of war. People voted for a long time to send Americans off to decades of war, and now they want to go and privatize and gut the VA. I think that's ridiculous.
It is great to see so many people are connected into this live telephone town hall with Congressman Deluzio. Remember, if you'd like to submit a question, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. Quickly, I'd like to share the results of the poll we asked moments ago, and it was about the question regarding lowering costs. Actually, it's inverse of that. I apologize. The question, as I proposed it, are higher costs impacting you and your family this holiday season? And of those that answered, 90% said yes. And then the remaining 10% said no. So everyone, thank you very much for responding to that first poll question. Your participation means a lot to us. Would like to get back to questions now as we work to answer as many as we can during this live town hall. Congressman, our next question comes from Christopher in Aliquippa. The Republican Party is corrupt, but you Democrats are no better. Do you expect me to believe you're not as corrupt as the other guys?
Absolutely, Christopher. And look, I'll tell you, I don't think corruption is, a problem only for one political party. Let's talk about stock trading in Congress as an example. There are people in both parties who do it. I've been calling for a stock trading ban for members of Congress and their families for quite a while now. I've been sponsoring bills. I'm supporting bipartisan efforts to force a vote to ban it. But yeah, look, I think people probably know that there are people in both parties in Washington who do this, and I just think it's nasty stuff. You get access to pretty sensitive information when you're in Congress. It's a public trust in my book, and to go and then try to enrich yourself in the stock market, cheating other people, I just think it's nasty, gross stuff. We ought to ban it. And look, let's talk about some instances of corruption. I didn't like when then President Joe Biden pardoned his son. I don't like my colleagues getting rich off information they learn in our jobs in Congress. I don't like now President Trump launching, or those around him launching a meme coin and using the office to promote scammy businesses. I can call out corruption where it is, and I think a major place that we've got corruption problems in our political system, our election system, is campaign finance. What do I mean by that? I mean the way money flows into elections and campaigns. There's this decision from the Supreme Court that I think is really responsible for a lot of this. It's called Citizens United. It turned our campaign finance system, which wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong, far from it, but it turned that system into one where corporate money, unlimited money, could flow through and just overwhelm the voices of the people. So many of the ads you probably see in elections, in campaigns, are funded by super PACs, often that don't have to disclose their donors. And to that super PAC point, these are the political action committees that, depending on how they're structured, can raise nearly unlimited special interest money. Oftentimes, corporations and the richest, most powerful people and others can surge that dark money into our elections. I think they're a major problem. I'm on a bill that would seek to fix this, that would limit super PACs to what they can receive in contributions, to be like the regular kinds of political action committees that have limits and disclosures of donors and all the rest. It's the tip of the iceberg for problems, but I do think the way money rips through our campaigns and rips through our political system is a major problem. It is rife, or makes our system rife with corruption, and it breeds distrust. We are a small d democracy. I mean that to say we elect our own leaders, we govern ourselves. When our voices can be overwhelmed by money, I think it really weakens our system of government, our self-government, and I think it gets to the urgency of taking on corruption.
So remember, during this live event, you can press *6 on your telephone keypad and get signed up to receive the Congressman's very informative e-newsletter. So take a minute, press *6 and get subscribed tonight. Another question for you here, Congressman. Beatrice in Stowe wonders, why are you so focused on smartphones and whether they should or shouldn't be in schools? This president is trying to get us into war with South America.
Well, I'm worried about both of those things, and I think my job is to be worried about a lot of things where I need to work on a bunch of issues where it's important for us in Pennsylvania, for the country. And so why worry about our kids and smartphones and social media? And I'm a lawmaker, I'm a dad to young kids, and I think like a lot of parents, I think we see the evidence. Big tech, social media, smartphones, they're really hurting our kids in the classroom and beyond. I mean, right, not just in school. And what those studies say, kids are doing worse in school, mental and physical health have both suffered, social relationships, a lot more. And I think kids and, parents know this intuitively, kids are getting pummeled by devices and apps that are designed to make them addicted to them, that are designed to make them not want to look away, to deprive them of the joy of playing with their friends and going outside and having a snow day, which I'm sure many here remember and love those snow days when we were kids. The data on this of how many notifications a school-age kid who's got a smartphone and all the apps, it's hundreds of notifications a day. Teachers report hating having to be the phone police in class. Kids understand that these distractions are tough on them too. So one of the things I did, I wrote a letter and had my team reach out to every school district and a lot of the schools in our congressional district, asking them, what's your smartphone policy for the coming school year? We did this over the summer. I put a report out not too long ago laying out what our local schools are doing, what they're telling us is working or not. I convened a roundtable that was bipartisan, right? So I had a state senator who's a Republican join us, along with teachers and advocates, to talk about what's happening. There's legislation at the state level in Pennsylvania considering policies to get phones out of classrooms with the obvious exceptions you would need for accessibility or safety or health reasons. And this is something that has managed to get support from Republicans and Democrats. You've had governors like a very conservative Republican in Arkansas, a Democrat in New York, reporting this has been successful in their states, and there's certainly momentum in Pennsylvania here to protect our kids, not just at school, but I hope in Washington to better protect our kids online from social media. There's some really nasty stuff out there, and I think parents know this, educators know this. We got to demand more and, frankly, more responsible behavior from these big and powerful tech companies when it comes to our kids.
So if you've got a question that you'd like to submit for the Congressman to answer, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. Again, press *3 if you've got a question on your mind. And the next up, Congressman Joe from Gibsonia asks, why aren't we calling tariffs the Trump tax?
Call them what you will. I think what a lot of people know is that Donald Trump's very reckless and chaotic trade policy, which has included, pretty wild and inconsistent tariffs, have really hurt a lot of parts of our economy, a lot of people, a lot of businesses, big and small. And I say that, right, we have a long and proud and continued to this day history of manufacturing, especially steel, glass in the AK Valley. We know what it is to see bad trade deals hurt places and people like us. And yet I know I can also say that what Donald Trump has been doing in this scattershot, chaotic trade approach to include his use of tariffs has been really pretty disastrous for a lot of parts of our economy for a lot of people. I've had lots of small businesses tell me about those impacts. I've heard from manufacturers that it is really difficult for them to make decisions about where to invest in their manufacturing capacity, even if they want to grow more domestic American manufacturing. When you've got tariff levels changing daily, weekly, monthly, it's hard to plan for a business. And so this, I think, to me, highlights how the president and his team's approach has been counter to the goal, right? If the stated goal is to encourage and promote domestic manufacturing, you got to be smart and strategic and consistent. It's one thing to say we're going to be tougher on targeted trade sheets sector by sector. I'm thinking China and steel is a classic example where they have been breaking the rules. That is very different than what we have seen in this trade war or trade wars from the president and those around him. And I think if you want to really care about domestic manufacturing, trade enforcement's part of it. Again, very different than what I think the president is doing across the board here. But you also have to pair that with industrial policy and domestic investment here at home. I serve on the Armed Services Committee. I talk a lot about our defense industrial base. That's a part of our economy where we need, for national security reasons, to have strong manufacturing, supply chains that extend maybe to our allies, but not certainly to our adversaries. And you got to have investment at home to encourage that. It's not enough just to slap tariffs on other countries and expect overnight you're going to grow domestic manufacturing. And so to me, it just highlights the incomplete nature of what Donald Trump and his team have been doing around trade, the scattershot and inconsistent approach, all of which I think has really hurt a lot of the economy, a lot of small businesses, and a lot of larger businesses too. And that means rising costs in a lot of those sectors that we're all paying for.
Well, let's jump in and do another poll question. Again, everyone listening in, please use your telephone keypad to respond. The question is, where do you get your health care? Press 1 for Medicare or Medicaid. Press 2 for employee-sponsored insurance. Press 3 for Penny. Press 4 for the VA. Press 5 for Other. Again, please use your telephone keypad to respond to this question. Where do you get your health care? Press 1 for Medicare or Medicaid. Press 2 for employee-sponsored insurance. Press 3 for Penny. Press 4 for the VA. Press 5 for Other. I see folks are responding. Thank you very much for participating. We'd also love to hear if you've got a question on your mind. To submit that question, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad. Congressman, next up, we've got a question from Ashley in Ohio Township, who says, while the ACA subsidies expiration and looming Medicaid cuts are concerning and certainly need to be addressed, what is Congress doing to make the cost of prescription drugs more affordable?
Ashley, I think Congress should be doing a lot more. Look, I think being able to get drugs and prescriptions you need to stay alive, to stay healthy, shouldn't break the bank. Back to the last question, for some prescriptions, prices could be increasing because of some of the trade actions from this administration. So I worry there, too. Some of what Congress has done and should build on, I'll give one example. The Inflation Reduction Act was this law that President Biden signed before I got elected. And some of what it did was have prescription drug out-of-pocket caps for folks on Medicare, had insulin caps as an example. It also allowed for Medicare to finally negotiate drug prices. I think it's crazy that it hasn't been the law before this. You could be able to compare what the VA paid for some drugs to what Medicare paid, and what Medicare was paying more. So some of those are finally going to affect. An additional round of drugs will go into effect in 2027. I think those first go into effect in 2026. The White House has negotiated with some manufacturers to bring down the price of weight loss and diabetes medicine, so things like Ozempic. I don't care who's in the White House. I want the president to be trying to negotiate down those drug prices for people, right? Because it's not enough to me to just say there's more negotiation now to bring drug prices down on Medicare for people who receive Medicare. A lot of folks beyond seniors who get Medicare are worried about prescription drug prices. A major culprit here, and if you've been on one of these calls with me, you've heard me talk about pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. So these are the corporate middlemen who are in between health insurance companies or corporations, the pharmacies, and patients getting their health care. And too often, they are extracting their profit out of this, steering prescriptions to their own pharmacies, forcing local pharmacies to lose money on filling lots of prescriptions, yet somehow along the way also jacking up the price of medicine for people, and again, extracting their profits in the middle of all of this. So they've been responsible, I think, for a lot of the rise of prescription drugs and also killing and seeing the closures of local pharmacies. I bet people have seen a local pharmacy close in your neighborhood or somewhere close. I think around 80 or so closed in Pennsylvania in 2024 alone. It's a problem. I've visited a bunch of pharmacies and talked to local pharmacists about this. When I launched the Monopoly Busters Caucus earlier this year, some of my colleagues, the owners of Town Drugs in Aspinwall, came down with me to talk about some of the exact problems they are seeing with pharmacy benefit managers, these PBMs, and why it's led to their business being tougher and higher prices for people. They talked about how PBMs steer customers toward their owned pharmacies where they have more control, and that vertical integration, that's the term, in antitrust that we talk about here, where they can abuse that power for pricing. The fees they charge to pharmacies for things as small as paperwork errors, right, that then cost the pharmacy money, that leads to the patient probably paying for more. And the closure of these independent pharmacies, that's bad for all of us, I think. These are neighborhood pharmacies, know their patients, oftentimes have experience and a history with a patient. And so I'm on a bunch of bills to reform and take on the power of these PBMs. I think it would be a major structural improvement that could help bring down drug costs on top of all these other debates we're having around healthcare. But I think they're a real problem in the economy and a real problem in healthcare that have led to higher prescription drug prices for people.
So next up, Congressman Barry from Fox Chapel and Nathan from Cheswick are asking about data centers. And Nathan is specifically asking, what are your thoughts on rising costs, especially with data centers and water consumption?
Yeah, great questions, folks. And I bet everybody knows costs are rising, especially on your energy bills. I think Duquesne Light announced around a 10% increase for this year. That's a lot. That's more than inflation. This is a real problem here. And I think, look, let's talk about, number one, our grid, and we don't have enough power already being generated, right? When you see any of the reports of these auctions and what it's meaning when it ultimately gets to consumers and customers and all of us, of demands on the grid versus power generation, we need more power generation, especially with all this demand for power. And that's a problem, I think, across the country, and certainly we're part of that in Pennsylvania that have to be worried about it. So number one, I think that's a real concern. I think there is also, and folks I bet know about where some of these projects are coming on, Allegheny County, Beaver County, out by Homer City as well. Certainly there's opportunity on the construction side, especially you see some of this construction where they're bringing new power generation, and the state has a major role here to play of whether they're going to demand that there be more power generation than these data center customers, so that we're not seeing rising electric bills for people. Those bills, which we know have been rising. I think there's a real risk when we then even just think about what are these data centers powering. It's AI. And look, some opportunity, of course, if AI is helping people flourish in their jobs, drive innovation, but also some major risks, right? There is, I think, profound risk of whether AI could supplant human work in a lot of jobs in a lot of industries that we haven't even really contemplated yet. I think it's been a real failure of the Congress that in 2025 we still don't have a legislation that could even really do the kinds of study to talk to the leading experts to put guardrails here, to make sure this is responsible development, to guard against the worst abuses. This is all happening not in a vacuum, where we've got countries like China and others who are driving their own investment that won't have those kinds of guardrails or protections for kids, for our data, for so much else. There's also, and I bet people know this, it's been in the news, efforts to block state regulation or state rules around AI. There were people who were trying to put this in the defense bill. Thankfully, that didn't happen. President Trump is now trying, through an executive order, to block state regulation or state rules here. I think, number one, I doubt he has the power to do that. Congress could. And if Congress were to do such a thing, it should be because there is a strong, smart law being passed in Congress to do this across the board in the country. That hasn't happened, of course, and so for the president to step in here, I think is wrong. And so I'm laying out a bunch of opportunities and risks, and so much of this will fall on local decision makers, on zoning for what will happen in local communities, and the state as the state navigates new power generation, the kinds of permitting and approvals for these projects. But I think there is a tremendous pressure on energy costs already, and we have to get clean and new energy sources online to keep down energy costs for people and keep our air and water safe and clean.
So here's another question. This one's from Myra in Indiana Township, who's asking, did Congress start a 30-day countdown according to the War Powers Act?
Thank you for the question. And, this administration is taking the position that what they are doing off Venezuela and in the Eastern Pacific does not require those kinds of war powers resolution notifications or clocks. And I'm sure folks have followed the news of these strikes. I talked about it in my opening remarks here that I have serious concerns because there has not been a congressional vote. There has not been a debate with the American people or a decision by the American people to send Americans to war, to authorize military force in Venezuela or anywhere else involved in these strikes. And there are votes, I think, expected maybe even this week on some of these war powers resolutions to direct the removal of U.S. forces from hostilities or strikes like this. I have voted in the past, in my first term when Joe Biden was president, a Democrat, for war powers resolutions because I think the American people and Congress get to decide whether and when we put Americans in harm's way, send Americans to fight. I don't think any president gets to decide that. To me, this is not a partisan issue. It is one about our Constitution and what role the Congress has. And I take that as one of my most sacred responsibilities, whether I would ever vote to send Americans to risk their lives and fight and die. I'm a veteran of the war in Iraq. I think it was a poor decision to send Americans to fight, yet that was a decision that Congress made when I was a young man, certainly. And so I think this is a serious problem. It's a serious constitutional problem. The American people, no one on this call, as far as I know, has even seen the Trump administration's legal rationale, the legal memo that they have kept classified and away from the American people as their legal justification for what these strikes are. I've been clear that should be something out in the public, that this debate should be happening with all of us across the country, with us in the Congress. And then let's have a debate. Let's have a vote if there's something you think the American people need to authorize. But that hasn't happened because the administration doesn't think they need to. So I will keep everyone posted. As I said, we expect votes maybe this week on some of these war powers resolutions. But again, this is to me, not a partisan one. This is one where it comes back to my oath to the Constitution. And what's in, for the students of the Constitution, Article 1, which is the first article that lays out Congress's powers and responsibilities, and it's Congress, through the American people, who decide whether we send Americans to fight or whether we authorize a war or military force. That hasn't happened here.
So thank you to everybody who has sent in their questions. If you would like to submit a question, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. And I'd like to quickly share the results from the second poll question that we asked that many of you answered. The question was, where do you get your health care? 51% of those that responded are on Medicaid or Medicare. 32% are part of an employee-sponsored insurance program. 6% get from Penny. 3% from the VA. And 8% have something other. So again, everyone, thank you very much for responding and participating in that question. Congressman, next up, we've got a question here from Russell, who's asking, Why isn't anybody looking into shoring up Social Security by eliminating the income limit on the company side of the tax?
Thanks, Russell. Well, let me start first. I'll have my legislative team take a look at exactly that. I will tell you there are proposals, and I'm on some of them, that would shore up Social Security for quite a while. This is an earned benefit. You pay into Social Security, you earn your benefits. This is something that after a lifetime of hard work is there to help you retire with dignity, keep a roof over your head, pay your bills. I could go on and on. Folks know it. Some of those bills I'm on, Social Security 2100 Act is an example, right? That strengthens benefits and does a bunch of things, but it also says, hey, if you make $1 billion a year, you should be paying more taxes than someone who makes $180,000 a year towards Social Security. And that's what the current law is. Basically, after $180,000 or so, you stop paying into Social Security. I think that's foolish. I think that's fiscally reckless. I think changing that would be a big move us toward keeping Social Security strong for a long, long time for generations to come. The Social Security Expansion Act, another bill I'm on, that similarly will shore up the program for generations to come. To me, this is about honoring that promise of Social Security, not just for seniors who are receiving benefits today, but for my generation, for my kids' generation, who are going to work, who will and should expect that it's going to be there. I hear people sometimes say, oh, I doubt Social Security would be funded. I think that's wrong. That's a bad decision that policymakers and members of Congress are making. I don't make that decision. I think that we should be shoring up Social Security. I think asking people who make hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars to pay a little more in taxes to say that they shouldn't pay the same as someone makes $180,000 a year is a reasonable way to make sure this program is there and protected for folks. People probably know the cost of living adjustment for this coming year. It's about 2.8%, a little higher, I think, than last year's. And so that'll translate to about $56 extra a month, depending on your benefits. And so part of this legislation and some others is to make sure that that calculation for cost of living is accurate and reflects actual costs for seniors, which can be higher in some categories, especially healthcare. So it's something I'm worried about that we fix, and I'm on some legislation to do that.
Don't forget, the congressman and his staff put out a very informative e-newsletter, and during this event, you can get subscribed to that by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. So take a minute right now, press *6, and get signed up to receive the congressman's very informative e-newsletter. Now we've got an online question, Congressman. This comes from Morgan, who says the Whiskey Run train bridge over 376 is corroding as a result of rust and neglect. Are you aware of this? If not, it is a giant concern. Who will you report this to?
Morgan, thank you. And if anyone knows the bridge Morgan's talking about, I think you know exactly what he's talking, or she, Morgan, is talking about. I'm aware. My team and I are in touch with local officials. We've actually been trying to get the railroad there to take responsibility and get some repairs. And that's a great reminder, by the way. One of the things I've been doing since the horrible East Palestine derailment was to help our local governments, when they're dealing with railroads, get things like crossings and rail bridges and tunnels fixed. We had some success in places like Indiana Township getting that done, but it's often tough for a borough or a township to get a big, powerful railroad on the line. It's one of the ways that I'm trying to be helpful and supportive of local government through my job as our federal congressman. There's a bill I'm on with my neighbor, Representative Summer Lee, the Rail Bridge Safety and, I believe, Transparency Act. This is about minimum safety standards for rail bridges, having better audits of those, better transparency on these safety reports for the public. Oftentimes, it takes, I'm not exaggerating, a member of Congress to even get these safety inspection reports, and they tell us sometimes very little. And I think if you've ever been on one of these calls or heard me talk on the news, you probably know I care a heck of a lot about rail safety and getting my Railway Safety Act passed. My constituents and our neighbors in Darlington and in Beaver County, just like their neighbors across the border in Ohio and East Palestine, went through a pretty horrible thing a couple years ago, and yet we still don't have action on the Railway Safety Act. It frustrates me. The members of Congress who are in power in the House and the Republican leadership will never say straight up why they won't move the bill. I remind them that J.D. Vance was one of my Senate co-leads when he was in the Senate. Now the Vice President, of course, Donald Trump, supported the bill just like Joe Biden did. I want the President and the Vice President to pressure my Republican counterparts to pass the Railway Safety Act. We've updated the bill to incorporate the recommendations from the NTSB, that's the agency that investigated the derailment, to make sure that anything that could be learned from that horrible derailment goes into the bill and then is something that is now law for better safety requirements, so that these trains carrying hazardous materials have to follow better and stricter rules. And the bill also increases penalties when railroads break the rules. Now they're often a slap on the wrist. So I could talk a lot about what's going on rail safety. I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful we get this done. I'm in this fight, as I've been for quite a while. There's a bill that we've got to pass around surface transportation on one of my committees. It's the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. I think this coming year I'm pushing to get rail safety included in that bill. I will continue to push to pass it either that way or on its own. Our senators in the past have been supportive in the Senate. I hope that will continue with Senator McCormick and Senator Fetterman to support this bill. This is common sense for us in Pennsylvania. And I'll cite this stat that people probably heard me cite. A lot of people in our part of Pennsylvania, a lot of our neighbors, many of us on this call, live pretty close to the tracks. Almost half, a little less than half, live within a mile of the tracks. Around 95% of people in our congressional district live within 5 miles. So if one of these toxic, dangerous derailments happened, as it did in East Palestine, a lot of us would be at risk and in danger. Let's pass the Railway Safety Act. Let's pass rail safety legislation. And yes, Morgan, back to where you started, let's push these railroads to keep their bridges and their infrastructure in better condition to protect all of us.
Now, Congressman Deluzio, Katie is asking, what is your stance on election integrity and security?
Katie, thanks for the question. This is one of those things that should not be a partisan thing at all. I think if you care about American democracy, you want to have safe and secure elections. To me, that's about protecting voting rights, protecting public trust. Before I was in Congress, I was working on those issues. At Pitt Cyber, for instance, there was a Blue Ribbon Commission on Pennsylvania's election security that pushed for things like post-election audits, paper ballots that if you had to, you could count manually or you could audit to make sure that results were accurate, reducing risks to paperless machines should there ever be sort of hacking or things like that. All things designed to show evidence, right, of results, to give public trust, to earn that trust, making sure things like voter registration databases and lists are maintained and are accurate and are protected from cyber attack. I'm co-leading a bill that I just recently announced that will better secure our voting systems through things like penetration testing. If anyone works in cybersecurity, they'll know what I'm talking about here. So to me, this is about the blocking and tackling of our democracy, and that's something as simple as making sure our voting machines are strong and resilient, making sure we've got paper ballots that we can audit and if need be manually recount, that we've got our voter rolls kept current through things like automatic voter registration and list sharing across states, that we have strong cybersecurity and cyber defenses in our systems. Remember, our elections are mostly run at the county level. I think it's kind of crazy to tell counties that they have to be frontline cyber warriors against nation states. They need help from our federal government, and they need resources. And so that's something I'm always pushing for, to make sure our federal government is assisting state and county officials who are running our elections. These are your neighbors, probably. You might see at a polling place, or county officials who do this as well. They need our support. They need our help with the federal government. They need cyber security assistance, and those are things where the federal government is uniquely positioned to help provide that support. Those are smart investments, I think, in our democracy, and it's part of my bigger defend democracy agenda around ethics reform and fighting corruption, protecting voting rights, and that third pillar or third category we're talking about is election security. So it's something I care a lot about and have been working on since I got elected to the Congress.
So I notice a few folks are asking about your recent video, and those include Nancy and Jim, as well as Marshall from Churchill, who says, "Thank you for standing up to Trump with that video. I'm proud of you. I'm worried that Trump is going to target you or have the FBI open an investigation?
Well, thanks for the note. I appreciate the expression of pride. Look, I first took the oath to the Constitution when I was a midshipman. As a teenager, it's the same one essentially I take in Congress. It's the same one that everyone takes who serves. And that oath is pretty central to how military service works, to how my service works in the Congress that you all have elected me to do. And, what we said and what I said in that video is the law. It's the law I learned at the Naval Academy. If you've served, you learned it in boot camp. Commanders train their troops on it. Military JAG attorneys help commanders think through scenarios. Secretary Pete Hegseth, even, and I'm sure maybe some people have seen some of these clips, has said essentially the same things in lots of clips recently that have come out over the years about the imperative of following lawful orders when you're in the military, that no one can force our troops to follow illegal orders. Even the Attorney General now, Pam Bondi, who seems to have forgotten this, essentially argued the same thing in a brief to the Supreme Court, I think last year or so. This is the law. It's not controversial stuff. People know it. But I will tell you, the president's response to me and others saying the law was outrageous. His response was arrest him, kill him, hang him. Think about that. I never thought in my lifetime I'd have a president respond to members of Congress stating the law with threats for their death and hanging. Tells me more about him, frankly, than really anything else could. But I will say this, I will not be intimidated by him or anybody else. I've got an oath to keep. I've got a job I was elected to do. I've got constituents, many of you, all of you, to serve, and I'm not going to be intimidated or deterred from doing my job. I take that oath seriously. I love this country. It's the reason I served in uniform. It's the reason I sought out votes to do this job in Congress. So I'm honored to have that responsibility, and I won't shirk it for 1 second.
I want to thank everybody who are on the line with us and have also submitted questions. We have time for just one more question. And, Congressman, this comes from Pam from Beaver Falls, who says, it seems like Congress gets nothing done at all. I'm sick of both parties saying their hands are tied. Do you think Congress will get anything good done again?
I hope so. Congress should get some basic stuff done, some good stuff done. I mentioned one thing that I was proud we got done very recently, which was to beat back an effort that would have closed reserve centers, Navy reserve centers all over the country, including in Moon Township, out by the airport. That was a fight that we had to take on, that I helped lead, because language was included in the Senate that would have killed and closed those Navy reserve centers. I'm a co-chair of the Navy and Marine Corps caucus with a fellow Naval Academy grad and a Republican from New York, and we and others worked together to make sure that provision killing the Navy reserve centers didn't become law. And that's the kind of work you still got to do no matter the politics around here. We've got funding fights that are tough and tough business. I'm sure folks know, and yet, I work with whoever I got to work with to secure funding for things like the Montgomery Locks and Dam, which is a critical piece of infrastructure on the Ohio River in Beaver County that requires substantial hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. Those are good, solid union jobs that we need to keep commerce and goods flowing on our rivers. I introduced a bill that I think can really help a lot of local cops and become law. It's a bulletproof vest bill with a colleague from New York, bipartisan bill that helps our local police departments buy better bulletproof vests. And so I'm giving it some examples that I think, despite the environment, which is tough and partisan, believe me, I think people know it, we can still get some things done. Now, I don't think you have to compromise your core values ever. That's not what I think people expect of elected representatives. But they do expect us to try to find some common ground on issues where we can. And so I have optimism about this country of ours. I have hope for our government. If I didn't, I'd be in the wrong line of business. So keep the faith, keep the hope. We'll have tough elections, certainly, but I expect that people want our Congress to function and to find some places to work together and work well where we can.
This brings us to the end of Congressman Deluzio's telephone town hall. Thank you, everyone, for participating and sharing your time with us this evening. If you have a question that wasn't answered Or if you need assistance from a federal agency, please go to the contact page on the Congressman's website, deluzio.house.gov. You can also call the Congressman's office at 412-344-5583. Again, 412-344-5583. You can continue to stay in touch with Congressman Deluzio through social media at Rep. Deluzio or by subscribing to his e-newsletter, which you can sign up for at his website. Now I'll turn it back over to Congressman Deluzio for some closing remarks and anything else he'd like to add. Congressman?
Thanks, Dirk, and thanks, everybody, for coming on tonight. As I said, while I'm down in Washington working for us back home, more than 10,000 people joined. That's great. Thank you for spending some time with me. And look, I know we're living in what can feel like some pretty divided times, fights about war powers and health care, just a couple examples of some big and serious disagreements that are in our country and our Congress. I know we will not agree on everything, but I know that a lot of what unites us is stronger than so much of what can divide us. I often talk about our Western Pennsylvania values, hard work, patriotism, sacrifice. That's what makes our part of the world that we call home so special and worth our efforts, especially in this holiday season. Let's remember, if we can, how much more we all share in common, how we're bound together as Americans, no matter where you're coming from. Remember, my team and I are here to help with any issues you're having with a federal agency, setting you up with a tour of the Capitol, if you come to Washington, requesting a flag flown in honor of a loved one. We're always, and right now, actually accepting applications for internships, so summer internships in my district and Washington, D.C. offices. Those applications are due in March, can be submitted on my website. If you want to stay connected and updated on my work and my team's work, you can subscribe, if you would, to my e-newsletter or follow the social media accounts. And please keep sharing your thoughts and voice with me. You're always welcome to call my Washington office, my district office. You can share your thoughts through a message on the website. If you're calling D.C., that's 202-225-2301. Calling in the district, it's 412-344-5583. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to talk more. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, everybody. Have a great night.